Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1059 just came out, and this was one of the craziest chapters in One Piece history. Like, across the entire story. Because it is very, very, very rare that Oda has this many insane developments take place back to back to back over the course of a single chapter, with this many characters that we are really excited about and really hyped to see, all in one location, in one incident. That's just an off-screen thing that has nothing to do with the Straw Hats. Because we've gotten used to the idea that, okay, once an arc ends, especially a major arc, we get some nice outside world building. We get to check in on what's going around with all of the other major players, or at least some of them, and maybe there's an interesting incident here or two. This chapter somehow topped the reveal of Cross Guild. It not only topped it, I think it blew it out of the water, because reading this chapter page after page, it was as though every time, well, we don't actually turn pages, obviously. If we're reading the chapter this early, none of us here are really turning a page exactly, right? But as I scrolled down, reading bit by bit of this chapter, I think every subsequent page was some new crazy incident that you would not, that felt almost as though it was, I don't know, some weird fever dream or something like that, because it was like, okay, so now Blackbeard is here. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So, Yamato, I almost don't even want to talk about this beginning chapter stuff, because all the how did Oda fit so much into this chapter? Am I crazy, or did like a lot happen in this chapter? Marco, Shanks, cool. I don't really have anything else to say about that. Marco and Shanks, buddy, cool. It seems like Marco's being taken out of the story, at least for a little bit. Although there are theories that the Straw Hats' next island is going to be Sphinx Island. This is based on some people seeing certain things in a One Piece magazine that indicated that Luffy's route seemed to be setting him onto Sphinx Island. So maybe the Straw Hats make their way over to Sphinx Island next. I don't know. That's surprising to me. I would expect Elbaf to be next, but if that's where they go, that's where they go, right? Good to see Luffy did get to talk to Marco finally, after, you know, Marco putting his life on the line, I guess, Marco's been Luffy's little guardian angel in secret for the longest time. Obviously over the course of Marineford War, but in Wano and Onigashima, Marco really held down the fort in many ways for the Straw Hats and the Straw Hat Alliance. Starting with, let's not forget, Marco is the reason that the rest of the Big Mom pirates were just not involved in the Onigashima War. I think Marco actually, now that I think about it, is low-key. Because imagine you just had another not full, but you had another Yonko crew just involved. I think that would be quite a problem for the Alliance if Marco had not, you know, eliminated basically all of the Big Mom pirates, minus Perospero, at the very beginning of the war. So I won't say Marco's low-key MVP, but I think he's kind of forgot. He really, really did a lot over the course of that war, be it holding off Big Mom. Why am I talking about this? Big Mom, King Queen, you guys know what Marco did. Let's shove Marco off to the side, okay? He's not here anymore. Yamato, I do have to talk about a little bit. I've said this before, which is that if Yamato, as you all know, I don't have any particular fondness for Yamato as a character. I feel like she detracted, if anything, from the events of Wano, and it was worse for the story that she was included at the point that she was, and given the lack of writing around her, but the extreme amount of screen time and action that she seemed to take up for some reason, right? That being said, I am happy that Oda wrote in a more valid reason, I think one that many of us came to expect, that Yamato would have the realization that she should be staying around to protect Wano, rather than just going around sailing the seas with the rest of the Straw Hats and just having fun. That was literally a lesson that Odin learned come end of his journey. Right, that he should have stayed behind, otherwise bad things happen to Wano when you just go around adventuring, right? Now, Yamato did not put that into the perspective, the much more important perspective or realization that maybe she should not be following Odin every beat of the way, and maybe she should try to be herself, right? That's the thing that we're really looking for her to grow into, kind of being herself, rather than just trying to copy everything that Odin was and what he did. I think that that's a step, though, that could be coming around the corner next time that we're in Wano, because it does seem, I'm happy to see that it does seem as though Oda does have something in mind for Yamato as a character. The next big step for her does seem to likely be something like learning that she does not need to obsessively try to emulate Odin and try to literally be Odin, right? Because that's something that we never saw her grow out of. So, with the last things that she said to Luffy and crew, I think now that there is actually potential for Yamato to join the crew. I've been staunchly against Yamato joining the crew for the longest time. Why? Because no character arc. There's no writing around the character. It's a very flat, one-dimensional character that does not deserve a spot in the crew and would never make sense as joining as a main character, at least in my opinion. However, this is the first chapter that actually indicates that there's potential change coming. If there's potential change coming, then we could be seeing a very different Yamato by the end of the story, one that would actually make sense as being a fully grown, matured character that could reasonably make sense as part of the main cast of characters joining the Straw Hat crew. I am of the opinion that just because you dislike a character at first, lots of times the best character arcs come out of growing to like a character that you initially disliked. I didn't like Momonosuke, now I really like Momonosuke, largely because of the character arc that he went through. I could see myself really liking Yamato and hoping that she joins the crew if she actually gets some character writing and a character arc and stops just being this... I've said enough about Yamato, right? Said enough about Yamato, but I'm like serious when I say that I would be happy to see Yamato join the crew if what we hope could come out of this, you know, her extended stint in Wano does end up happening, right? The fact that Oda's still planting the fact that, you know, Yamato still wants to join the crew, she still wants to be a crewmate, that's interesting to me because we know that there's more story set up for her, right? More story set up for her in the future, it seems like. And two, Oda's not dropping the idea that Yamato might join the crew. So I might be actually looking forward to future Yamato, a different changed Yamato, actually being a Straw Hat. So, all of that aside, right? All of that aside, let's talk about the crazy stuff that happened in this chapter. One, to everybody that said that it made sense for Kobe to capture Boa Hancock. Kobe, who was literally a cabin boy of below average human strength 2 years ago, right? People thought that it would make sense for Kobe to not only catch it. It just makes no sense. I don't even know what to say. It makes no sense to think that Kobe could capture Boa Hancock with like 2 years of being a Marine. Like, you can talk about fast growth rates. Like, yeah, Luffy got really strong in 2 years, but let's put it this way: Luffy, from Luffy's starting point at the end of pre-time skip, right? Luffy's starting point at the end of pre-time skip, after Luffy trained for 2 years, at that point, right? Luffy coming out of the time skip, so Luffy with 2 years time skip training, that Luffy would probably have a very difficult time fighting Hancock. He has a good advantage because he's immune to her abilities and everything like that. But I'm saying in terms of like where he stacks up in strength, you could argue that overall in the grand scheme of things, Hancock was still stronger than Luffy at the end of Luffy's post-time skip training. You could make that argument, or at least they're in the same ballpark. So to think that Kobe, who was like 100 times weaker than Luffy, right? At the end of the pre-time skip, to think that Kobe could magically catch up to Hancock, that makes no sense. That makes no sense whatsoever, and it's just disrespectful to Hancock's character. To think that Kobe would come in and capture Hancock. You know who ended up getting captured? Kobe got captured. That's what makes a million times more sense than Boa Hancock getting captured by Kobe. So let's get that out of the way. Insanity to put that level of disrespect on the Pirate Empress, right? What happens? Kobe is, first of all, he's not exactly leading this expedition, right? He's not leading this expedition. You got Vice Admiral Yamakiji, but as it turns out, the real crazy part of why they believe that they can take out Boa Hancock like that is not because of Kobe or a Vice Admiral or anything like that. If they were smart, they would have sent Fujitora, who's blind. But it's the Seraphs, the Seraphim. I want to call them the Seraphim, but people in my chat yesterday were telling me that its singular form is Seraphs. Whatever. The Seraphim are by far the most interesting development we've had in One Piece at least in terms of the arms race that we've been learning about. You know, like some people have gifters, some people have, Big Mom's crew. She's making alliances. She's trying to get Germa's technology and things like that. Blackbeard pirates are trying to get devil fruits. The Seraphs are by far the most interesting development in terms of this whole world arm race. Because to essentially replace the Shichibukai with more useful Shichibukai that can do probably not quite the same stuff. I'm not going to assume the Seraphs are as strong as the Shichibukai, although the feat that the Mihawk Seraph pulled out right off the bat That's what we would expect of the actual real-life Mihawk, right? I'm not going to say the Seraphs are as strong as the Shichibukai, but they're more obedient, which is what matters. Like, I will take 50%, 60%, 70% of the strength of the Shichibukai and them actually doing their jobs over the actual Shichibukai any day of the week. It completely revamps the setup of the final war, and this is something that I'm going to be talking about in my next Tuesday's video, which is how this totally changes the landscape. It swings things firmly back into the world government's favor as being the most threatening force undeniably on the seas right now. And I think that was a long time coming, because if you just look at recent events, a lot of it hasn't made the Marines look that, I wouldn't say like competent or incompetent, but that formidable, just because it seems as though a lot of things are happening that are outside of their control right now. Every time we cut back to them, they're in chaos because they're upset because something or the other went wrong, or some new pirate alliance, or some new Sabo doing some stuff basically and causing revolutions here or something like that, or this cross-guild worry that they have, and now they're the ones being hunted. So the Marines really were kind of getting beat down on from all sides for a little bit. So now the timing of this chapter and revealing that they do have a trump card that very much is a trump card, I think that there is no better way to have introduced these Seraphim than by actually giving characters like Blackbeard a scare. You know, an Emperor of the Sea with two of arguably the most powerful devil fruits in existence, if not the most powerful devil fruits in existence. Blackbeard was stressed. I'm not going to be like, oh, he couldn't beat that Mihawk Seraphim. I'm just saying that that was something that caught him by surprise and legitimately had him seeming somewhat worried. And rightfully so, based on the fact that the majority of the damage done to Amazon Lily over the course of that battle was done single-handedly by that Mihawk Seraphim with a single attack. That is insane to think about. Like, we cut to the island and we're like, man, the island looks like it's really in ruins. It's in ruins basically because of one Seraphim. Insane, and it's being emphasized at the end of the chapter that those two exited the battle without a single scratch. Everybody is worried about these Seraphim. Like, they're creepy little things that have unquantifiable levels of power at the moment, and we know nothing about the rest, like the full scope of it. How many more are they? Are they in their final forms, or do they mature into full-grown adults? After all, we know that these are new creations, right? These are new creations, so maybe they're being debuted a little bit early, and so they're still in child forms. Maybe they develop into full-grown adult forms. Lunarian DNA, how does that play into their abilities? There's so much that we've yet to uncover about these characters, but this chapter really gave us a good idea that these things are not to be messed with, and even the strongest characters in the world are to be at least weary of what these things can do. So that's such an exciting setup for the final war of One Piece and what the world government has up its sleeve. I think Oda really delivered, I think, better than anyone could have imagined with the SSG and what was promised with the SSG, because I think we were all skeptical for a while, like, okay, replace the Shichibukai, how are you going to replace the Shichibukai? And it's like, no, we are literally going to replace the Shichibukai, and we're going to make them better and more efficient because they actually do what they're told. So huge props for the SSG, the Seraphim reveal. And what's crazy is that might not be the only thing that the SSG produces. Even if it is, that's perfectly fine. That's still great. Seraphim are amazing, right? Let's talk about the other stuff. Blackbeard and his crew and Hancock. I think Oda treated all these characters. Okay, first of all, I was surprised to see that Blackbeard was interested in Hancock's fruit, and that's why he was going after. That's what he was so excited about back in chapter 956. I wouldn't expect it to have been Hancock's fruit, but it makes sense. It makes sense. I think at the end of the day, what really needed to come out of this is kind of establishing the Seraphim, establishing what's going on with Hancock and her group and everything like that, and getting Kobe in Blackbeard's hands, right? Those are the main outcome. Like, those are the main results of this event that really Oda seemed to set up this whole incident for, right? So Kobe being captured by Blackbeard is clearly a big deal because that's the one really tangible result from this whole chapter that we're looking at. I would say that I would assume that that's a really big deal just because I doubt that Oda would devote pretty much a full chapter to an incident like this that has nothing to do with the Straw Hats just for show, just to show off the Seraphim or just to get a cool scene of Blackbeard talking to Rayleigh or whatever. So Kobe being captured by Blackbeard seems like it's a big deal. Some things that people in my chat were talking about yesterday were throwing around ideas of was maybe that Blackbeard's going to go, Kobe's a well-known Marine hero, maybe Kobe gets handed off to Cross Guild, who currently have Marine bounties, which leads to some interesting interactions as who's in Cross Guild. Again, my chat kindly reminded me yesterday, Alvida, so it kind of brings Kobe's story back full circle, back into being Alvida's captive, which is funny. But there's something there, right? Something very important with Kobe being captured by Blackbeard. If he's not being handed to Cross Guild, maybe it's bait for Luffy to finally have a fight with Blackbeard, or the first interaction with Blackbeard, or something like that. I hope that it's not Kobe having to be a damsel in distress, just because it kind of hurts how far he seems to have come into the story and become as capable as he is, that he still needs Luffy to come save him. But let's wait and see, right? Let's wait and see. In terms of Blackbeard and Hancock, I think Oda did a good job treating both of them really well this chapter. I think Blackbeard really, Blackbeard is the most piratey pirate we have in the story, which is what makes this, the vibe that he brings this chapter and the vibe that he brings in general is just so much fun, and it feels very, I don't know if there's a better word for it than piratey, because he's barging in, trying to grab treasure before everybody else can. He's not, extremely stoic or badass like you would expect from like a crocodile or like a Kaido or something like that. He's just running in with a general whim and like kind of flying by the seat of his pants. And he's like, yeah, let's go in and get him. It's like, oh wait, what's this? What's this seraphim? What's this little kid thing with a sword? Oh, that's a problem. Oh wait, Hancock's ability is a problem. All right, better not let you go. Like, it's not everything is. He doesn't have everything. Things still worry him and stress him out regularly, but he's still down to play, if that makes sense. He's down for whatever happens for the most part. So, it's not like he came in with like a brilliantly calculated plan. It looks like he was like, let me just shove these marine ships out of the way. You all get out of the way. Don't know what this thing is. I'll worry about that later. Okay, let me snag Hancock before she just screws over all, well, she did get his whole crew and everything like that, but let me catch her before she basically kills us. So I enjoy the attitude that Blackbeard brings to these sort of conflicts, which is he feels like he's a wild card, but at the same time he's not a wild card, because we know that he's very smart and calculated. It's just an interesting blend of characteristics. So it just feels like a very classic pirate captain. It's kind of what you expect out of that. So Blackbeard successfully captures Boa Hancock. Again, I think Oda made Blackbeard look good this chapter. He's an emperor. He should be able to capture Boa Hancock. But at the same time, just because Boa Hancock got captured does not mean that Oda doesn't give her high degrees of respect, in that he makes it clear that Blackbeard is worried about what happens if he lets her go. If he lets her go, she could potentially turn Blackbeard to stone. Blackbeard fully believes that she could turn him to stone. That's as high praise as you can give a character. I think that, Blackbeard is legitimately worried that if I stop holding you right now, you have the ability to basically defeat me. So Hancock, her ability is hyped up, right? Clearly she was caught, I suppose, a little bit off guard by Blackbeard or whatever. I think it's a good way to make it clear that everybody deserves their respect across the scene. The craziest part is obviously Silver's really showing up. Side note, turns out Shaki was the former Empress. I really like that idea, just because it fits with what we've learned of Amazon Lily Empresses in the past, which is that they all inevitably at some point or the other. We know Shaki was a big-time pirate 40 years ago. She was a big-time pirate 40 years ago. That tracks, lines up. We know that Amazon Lily Empresses, they usually end up falling in love. It does seem like she has that relationship with Rayleigh, so you can kind of chalk out a bit of a potential story there with, okay, she probably fell in love. She was the Empress 40 years ago, big time pirate or whatever. Fell in love with Rayleigh, most likely abandoned the pirate life, etc. I mean, we even start this chapter early on with Hancock talking about how she wants to just go marry Luffy. I still don't think that's necessarily going to happen in the story, but you never know. So Shaki and Rayleigh, I don't know. I like their dynamic a lot, and it makes a lot of sense too as to why Rayleigh for so long has had this positive relationship with the Amazons, because normally they're like, you're a man, you're terrible or whatever, but Rayleigh seems to have the trust and respect of the Amazons, at least from what we saw back pre-timeskip. So Rayleigh showing up, this was a great way to show respect to Rayleigh as well, which is that, okay, Oda makes it clear that Rayleigh right now couldn't beat Blackbeard, and that seems right. I think it would be a bit much if Rayleigh right now could beat Blackbeard. But at the same time, it's implied that it's because Rayleigh is too old, so it's exciting to think that Rayleigh, at least himself, believes that in his prime, it would be a different story. Right now, the reason he can't take on the current Blackbeard is because he is too old, but at the same time, as he said, his reputation is so strong that Blackbeard is willing to at least listen and go along with what he says. Not necessarily that Blackbeard is scared of Rayleigh or whatever, but just Rayleigh is strong enough and a big enough name, has that reputation that Blackbeard is going to listen and not look to make things any messier than things already are, right? So that's, kind of what we hope for and expect from Rayleigh. Not that he's going to be, taking down top tiers at this day and age with him being God knows how old and so out of practice or whatever. But, the reputation and the presence that he brings, that's still brought down from his prime days, which everyone is going to respect. Doesn't matter who you are in the world, even if you're an admiral like you saw with Kizaru, or if you're an emperor like you are with Blackbeard. I like to see that as well. So across the board, this whole chapter, I feel like I've missed something, but I don't even know. Insane chapter. And what I liked a lot about it is that this is just the type of thing that I think we're going to get to see more and more as we approach the end of the story. Just more and more insane interactions between all sorts of really strong characters from across the entire story that we've been wanting to see for long periods of time. So I'm really excited about that. And the big thing that we're going to be doing in this chapter review is the voice of the people. So right now I'm going to be talking just a little bit about an idea that somebody from my Patreon had. So stay tuned. So the voice of the people works like this. Every week after the chapter comes out, my top patron tier members can submit comments. The comments with the most likes will be shouted out and discussed on stream. And this week's comment is actually really interesting, so I'm happy that I did this because this is not something that I thought of or clicked right away, right off the bat. So Carlos Echeverria said, "The Seraphim Pacifistas were created as a means to protect and directly carry out the will of the gods of the world, Im and the Celestial Dragons, just like the Seraphim in the biblical canon. I wonder if the world government will reveal more Lunarian-based weaponry other than the Pacifistas." So I'm going to stick to the first part of that because that's what's really interesting, right? These are literally God's angels, right? These are God's weapons of destruction, the Seraphim. Im, as we know how much the story is heading towards the idea of rebellion against heaven, right? So Im as the all-powerful God, that's something that I've been talking about in recent Im videos. Im as the all-powerful God, the Celestial Dragons as the other gods that rule the world. The story is heading towards the destruction of the world government and tearing that regime down that has been ruling the world for 800 years. I don't know why it didn't click with me, but the idea that literally God's soldiers that are being sent down, these seraphs, one, I wonder if they are the Holy Knights. I don't think that they're necessarily the Holy Knights that were being talked about. It sounds like those were pre-existing forces that already existed up in Morj, but it would be interesting if they are. The seraphs, they're these angels, these dark angels, literally dark angels, right? That are flying around, basically carrying out God's will. They're the secret weapons that the gods have been hiding for so long. I think that's really fitting for where we're at in the story. So I imagine that the imagery and kind of the heaven type imagery, I guess biblical imagery, I assume that a lot of that is going to increase as we head towards the finale of the story. And this was just a huge, I don't know, it's really blatant and in your face once you think about it. I just didn't think about it on my own when I was, after reading the chapter, but it just fits so perfectly that at this point they're fighting against some dark angels. So I'm happy that I think that's a great contribution for the first Voice of the People segment. So definitely looking forward to more of your ideas as we go on. So thanks, Carlos. But yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to. And you'll see stuff like that, I guess, working its way into future in-houses videos and everything like that. So talk to you all later.